Hi everyone, this is Sean Ismail from the Cloud Ranger, and you are viewing the Microsoft Azure training. Today we are going to watch the part 3 of the Azure Virtual Networks, and we are going to talk about the Affinity Groups as well as the Azure DNS. So let's get started. So what are Affinity Groups? You will see a lot of documents and a lot of blogs and even certain MSDN articles where they refer to Affinity Groups when they talk about resources on Microsoft Azure. So what affinity groups are is that it's a logical grouping of resources such as cloud services or your virtual network, virtual machines, storage, and things in Azure. And what it basically does is that whenever you create something on Azure, for example, a virtual network, machine, cloud services, it tries to put them very close to each other when it comes to physical proximity. Let me elaborate that a little bit. So in our very first videos, if you recall, when we were giving an introduction to Microsoft Azure, what we had talked about was that anytime you create something, Microsoft has several locations or regions where they have data centers, and you basically choose a location that's closest to you and you create your resources on Azure. So for example, in my videos, I have always been picking up on East US 2 as my location where I create all my resources. You probably are using something that's closest to you. So we do not know how many data centers are there in a single region, depending on wherever it is. Microsoft may place your resource in one data center in that location, and that's how you have your resources. Now, the problem with this is, for example, if you create 2 or 3 virtual machines, you will find out, for example, in East US 2, it may place these 2 or 3 virtual machines in separate data centers, or it may put it in the same data center far from each other, where the physical cluster is for creating these resources or hosting these resources. This may create some latency and very maybe not that significant, but it may be a little bit more amplified if we are trying to attach storages, or if we are trying to when I say attach a storage means virtual disk and as such on a single region or a single location. So for example, a virtual machine requires a couple of things, right? It requires computing, it requires virtual networks, and it obviously requires a storage. So if you are creating these 3 things separately, so you create the virtual network and it's created on one node of a cluster, and you create a storage which is probably on another node of a cluster in the storage subsystem, and you create the virtual machine, it will put them together, but they may not be very close to each other in physically in the same data center, or maybe they're not even together in the same data center. While they will work, but this is more of an efficiency concern and performance concern than anything else. So Microsoft came up with a plan. They said that if you create an affinity group which is tied to a region, what what it will do is that when you create the virtual machine or any cloud services or resources, it will physically keep them close to each other as much as possible. So it will try to put it on the same rack or on the same cluster or close by each other, where they will be very efficient performance-wise. So it was a very good idea. And it was defined at a subscription level. So you will create a affinity group at a subscription level, and we'll go through this momentarily in our demonstration. And like I said, it was tied to a region. So this seems like a good idea, though, right? I mean, you're keeping things together, and you're going to have great performance. But Microsoft is actually deprecating this in favor of regional VNets. What does this mean? Well, what Microsoft recently did, and I did a little bit of a research on this one, what they recently did is they sort of overhauled their entire networking system, or their regional networking systems, where it did not matter any longer if these resources were close together or not. So if you are going to have similar performance, doesn't matter which part of the data center you were physically located for your virtual machine or storage, it wouldn't matter to have them together. And the other problem that Microsoft was having was that they were creating virtual machines. We did not go so much into virtual machines, but they were creating this virtual machines with hardware specifications who were not close to each other in the data center. So when you were trying to mix match a bunch of resources together with certain virtual machines, this whole Affinity Group thing was not working out. So Microsoft sort of overhauled their entire networking and their infrastructure, where being close to each other or not being close to each other did not matter performance-wise. And that's one of the biggest reasons they're trying to get away from this whole Affinity Groups. And this is also one of the reasons I have not been demonstrating or doing anything with Affinity Groups because it's no longer mandatory. In fact, a few months ago, when you created a virtual network, you had to be part of an affinity group. But as you can see, when we created virtual network, there was no place where we went and selected any affinity group or even created one. So this brings another concern. Some of you may have already created virtual networks when it was required to be part of an affinity group. And a lot of these people, they might think that, hey, now that regional virtual networks are there, can we convert these virtual networks to a regional virtual network? Well, for now, in 2015, so far in the first quarter, um, there is no way you can do that. And in fact, Microsoft says in their MSDN site that they will update at one point everybody from an affinity group to a regional virtual network, but there has not been any details so far. Maybe they'll be having one in the future. And by the way, the term, when we say regional virtual network, it basically means a virtual network that's assigned to a region or a location, which is almost something you have to do always. Like anytime you create a virtual network, it has to be connected to a region. So if you see somewhere it says regional virtual network, just think of it as a virtual network, because um, it's no different. All the virtual networks that we created are by default called a regional virtual network, or just that. I mean, there is no other configuration that you have to do. It's just that Microsoft changed the terminology in between and started calling this regional virtual networks. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a demonstration on how to create one of these. Okay, I'm on my client computer. As you can see, I'm logged into my subscription. This is the management portal. And what we are going to do, as I mentioned, an affinity group is actually created at the subscription level. So we are going to go to settings, and you can see a tab here called Affinity Groups. And it actually says that you have not created any affinity groups, so we are going to add an affinity group here. So I'm going to just call this C Ranger AG for affinity group. And as you can see, this affinity groups was tied to a region. So I'm going to pick one for myself here. Go pick the one that's closest to you, obviously, and click OK. And it takes like a few seconds to actually create this. As you can see, it was relatively quick. So go to click OK. So now I'm going to go through the demonstration of what we could do with affinity groups and where it is still required or it's an option. So let's go ahead and create a network. When we create a virtual network, I do not have any. You can see it does not even give you an option to associate this with an affinity group. So if I create RangerNet as my virtual network, I'm going to select East USA 2. So I'm associating this to a region or a location. This is exactly what Microsoft calls a regional VNet or regional virtual network. You are associating a network with a region. Click Next. We are going to leave this all as default. There will be no changes here. I'm going to do 192.168.1, well, 0.0. It's going to be 16-bit. I'm going to do 1.0, and I'm going to make this a 24-bit subnet mask. So I get this range. Keep everything else default. Keep the name as subnet 1. And we are going to let this VNet get created. So as you can see that for creating a virtual network, you did not require even an affinity group. So let's go ahead and try something else right now, another resource. Let's try to create a virtual machine, and I'll show you this again. Compute virtual machine. If you try to do a quick create, you can see over here there's a region and affinity group that you can select from here. So since we have an affinity group created, it's actually allowing you to create a virtual machine which is associated with this affinity group. And this affinity group, as you know, is similar to having this as in EastUS2. We're just saying that keep everything together as physically close to each other as possible. And from the gallery, I'm going to not do a quick create. I'm going to show from the gallery where we'll be spending most of our time creating virtual machines. Let's just call this test VM, whatever. I'm not going to go that far. So I'm going to pick an image over here, random, whatever. Let's fire in all this information. We are not going to create this virtual machine, but I want to show you where the affinity group came in over here. So as you can see over here, it says region, affinity group, and virtual network. So you could go and put this virtual machine from this virtual machine to an affinity group directly. Obviously, we have been doing this. We have been putting this on the same virtual network. So you could do the affinity group association from here as well. So I'm going to cancel this out. Let's move to cloud services. So I'm going through all the services that we have created previously to show you that what we can do. Compute, cloud service, quick create. So if you put whatever cloud services, I'm just putting a random name. As you can see, it's giving you that option to put this in an affinity group as well. So these are the places, and there are more places. Like for example, if you create a storage account, we never really talked about it yet. We'll be doing this in future session. You could create a storage account and put that into an affinity group as well. Are we going to use affinity groups a lot for our sessions over here? Probably not. I'm not going to put anything in affinity group if I don't have to, because Microsoft is getting away from it. There's no specific reason to do this any longer, but it is still part of the 7533 exam, so there might be questions based on that. So we're just going over that. But for our practical and demonstration purposes, we'll most likely not be there doing anything with affinity groups. So that's all that is to there with affinity groups. I cannot think of anything else that may come out of that besides that. For infrastructure as a service, you'll not need it. I think there are people who still do the platform as a service. So if you're doing a cloud services with your worker and resource roles, the developers might want to use the affinity groups for whatever good reasons they may have. But for our infrastructure as a service, I'll not be using that too much. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic for today. And the next topic is DNS. So when we talk about DNS and do everything today, we are talking about the internal DNS. These are not the external DNS servers. So when we showed in the previous part, in part 2, when we talked about the big picture, we talked about that VIP and the cloudapp.net, the public DNS. This is not that. This is the internal DNS that is used for hostname resolution. So what is there really to talk about? So a couple of things. When you create a network, you are given an option to put in your own DNS information. If you do not put your own DNS information, Azure actually provides name resolution for you. So if you are used to a network, like for example, if you have your own domain, you'd have an Active Directory and you'd have a DNS server for your Active Directory, obviously. So any computer that you join to a domain is part of the DNS and all the name resolutions work out. In here, so far, all the virtual machines we have created, we have not put them or joined them to any domain. So there's no DNS server that we even put in when we created a virtual network. So Azure said that it is going to provide the network name resolution for us. And that's exactly what's called, the Azure provided name resolution. However, there are certain limitations, and this is why this is very important. When you create a virtual network and you're not providing a DNS and Azure is saying we are providing the name resolution, it is only providing the name resolution when you are in the same cloud service. So what do I exactly mean by that? So let me grab a pen real quick here. When you create a virtual machine, and so far the ones we have created, every time we created a virtual machine, it gave us the option to create a cloud service with that virtual machine. So we know that every virtual machine will have a cloud service. The cloud service will contain a virtual machine. And looking at our previous session, you know that a cloud service could have multiple virtual machines in it as well. But so far, we have just done that we have created a virtual machine and we have always had a separate cloud service. Azure does not provide name resolution between these two virtual machines if they are part of if they have their own cloud services. So Azure says that we can only provide name resolution if they are in the same cloud service. So this would be the scenario. There's one cloud service and there are two virtual machines in there, means these two hosts will be able to uh, resolve or use the Azure provided name resolution to look each other up. And there must be very good reasons for doing that, but that's by design. And in our demonstration, that's exactly what we will do, is that we will try to create these two scenarios and see the name resolution, if it's possible or not. So what do? Well, if you have a scenario like this, you'd actually have to put your own DNS server in here. What that means is that you'd have to, for example, create a DNS server and let there be DNS entries in there, which will basically resolve these two host names to its IP addresses. This would actually be very simple if you actually have an Active Directory forest here. So you have an Active Directory domain and you have your DNS server, and you will join these two to the domain controllers and join the domain basically, and the DNS entry will always be there for you to resolve each other by hostname. That's one way to do this. And when you create the virtual network, that's why it gives you that option to put that DNS server in there to do that. Besides that, if they have their own cloud services, they cannot resolve each other by hostname. And if you actually have them in the same cloud, they'll obviously be able to do this. So across the cloud services, you will have to have your own DNS server in the virtual network for the name resolution to work. So let's go ahead and work this out in a demonstration. This is the first one I'll do. I'll create a CRanger VM 100 and 200, and I'll keep the same cloud service name for both of them, but there will be two cloud services, and what we will see is that these two will not be able to look each other up based on their host name, because the Azure provided name resolution is not going to work in this scenario. So let me go ahead and get into our management portal and create two virtual machines. Okay, we are in our management portal. I do not have anything here except the virtual network that we had created. So let's go to virtual machine here and create a virtual machine. And by now, if you have followed most of my sessions, you will be quite used to creating virtual machines from this portal. So the first one we are going to create is going to be CRanger VM 100. I'm going to just pick an image for that. Let's put in all the account information. As you can see, I'm going to create a cloud service. If I do a drop down, I do not have any cloud services created. So it will create one while this virtual machine is being created. And it's going to name it the same as the virtual machine name. You could actually have a different name over here, as we have discussed this before, but it will be the same. And for our purposes, let's leave it like that. We're going to join the same virtual network. As you can see, that the Affinity Group we had created is still there. I did not delete it. So we are going to just use the RangerNet virtual network that we had created. And we are going to create that virtual machine. Let's go ahead and create the second one. And if you're following along, follow along and do the same. So we're going to call it CRanger VM 200. And I'm going to pick same image, size. Oops. I'm going to create a new cloud service, and I'm going to name this one CRanger VM2. As you can see that this already is different, right? So they are going to have their own cloud services. That's what I mean. Okay. So let's do that and that. So as you can see, they have their own DNS names here because it's picking that up from the cloud service name, right? So if we go to cloud services, I think one of them is already created. You can see that it's deploying the cloud service CRanger VM 100. So I'm going to pause this and come back when all of this are actually done. So I think I made a mistake over here. As you can see, it went and rather than picked up the virtual network, I went and picked the location. So this is not going to work for us. So what I'll do is I'll actually, when this gets provisioned, I'm going to delete this virtual machine and I'm going to create the CRanger VM 200 again, and I'm going to make sure that it's part of the same virtual network. So it actually has, it is going to be on the same location. Okay, so let me pause that and get back. Okay, so it took about 10 minutes to actually get all of this up and running. As you can see, I fixed the CRanger VM 200. It's now in the same VNet and therefore it's in East US 2. And these are the two VMs, and we can see there are two virtual machines, two cloud services that were created with two separate names. So this satisfies all our requirements here. This is the network topology is using right now. So I'm going to RDP into these two machines, and once the desktops come up, it takes a few seconds to actually for everything to happen. So I'm going to do this offline. I'm going to go ahead and connect to these two virtual machines, and I'll be back once they have all the desktop access ready. Okay, so I have RDP'd into those two virtual machines, CRanger VM 100 and 200, and they have opened to the server manager. Okay, let's see over here. All right, so we're ready. So let's go ahead and do the first thing. I would suggest that you do not do this in production box because by default, as soon as you created these virtual machines, they are accessible through certain endpoints from the public domain, or the public internet. So what I'm going to do right now is actually going to turn off the Windows firewall to demonstrate certain pings or ICMPs that we will send to resolve the host names. The other way you could do this is actually create firewall exceptions, but for the sake of time and ease, I'm going to just go ahead and disable them for now. And you would need this for the pings to happen. Okay, so let's go back to 100 here. Okay, open up the console. So we are now on CRanger VM 100, and we are going to go, we have the IP address 192.168.1.4. So we are going to try to reach now CRanger VM 200, and the way we do that is ping 192.168.1.5, I believe was the IP address, right? 192.168.1.5. Okay, so let's try 192.168.1.5 and see if we can get through. As expected, they are on the same virtual network, so we can get through. Let's go ahead and try now reaching them by their host name. So it will be CRanger VM 200. Let's see what do we see here. Okay, so ping request could not find the host CRanger VM 200. That's because if you look into our slide here, we mentioned that there is no way this ping or this hostname resolution would happen between these two virtual machines because they are sitting in their own cloud service. And the only time Azure provided name resolution works is when it's within its own cloud service. Means these two virtual machines would be sharing the cloud service. So we cannot uh, resolve the hostname from this uh, virtual machine to get to CRanger VM200. So similarly, when we go to CRanger VM200, we are going to do ping 192, if I can spell correctly, 192.168.1.4. And as you can see, we can reach CRanger VM100, but when we do ping CRanger VM100 by name, means we are trying to resolve it, it's not going to find it. So that's by design, and that's what I meant when I said that for the built-in Azure DNS to work, they need to be on the same cloud service. And the only way this can actually be fixed is if you actually have your own DNS server that you bring into this virtual network, and it does the name resolution for you between these two virtual machines, even though they're across two cloud services. And ideally, the easiest way to do that, and in most production, what will happen is that your virtual network will probably have a Active Directory forest. So you'll have a domain controller, you'll have a DNS. These virtual machines currently are not on a domain, so they are standalone computers, but you will in production most likely have your virtual machines part of a domain and joined to a domain, so they'll be able to register their DNS in your DNS server and resolve each other across the cloud. Otherwise, the only option for doing this would be being in a single cloud with two virtual machines, and we'll have a demonstration for that as well. But I want to show you something interesting before we go that far. Let's do ipconfig/all, and you can see that our range is 192.168.0.0.16 or 1.0 to 1.55. But if you look at the default DNS server that Azure has provided us, you'll see it's an Azure provided DNS server. Okay, so let's do this. Some of you already might know that because what we do is sometimes in our network environment, if you have an IP address but you want to know the host name, you'd use a specific switch to do that. So if you use ping with -a, it will take the IP address and resolve it and give you the host name. So we know that from here, we can't go to CRanger VM200, right? But we could go to its IP address. So we could do 192.168.1.5. It's expected. This is the demonstration we just had. What I thought of doing was ping -a and do 192.168.1.5. And what I found out is that when you try to look up this address, you can actually look it up and you can find out that it is picking up the hostname entry associated with this IP address here, which is interesting because when I do ping CRanger VM200 by name, it's not finding it. But when I take the IP address and do a resolving, it's finding that. I have no idea why it's doing that. I could not find any document regarding that. If you know, do let me know. If you find out somehow that why this behavior happens, leave it on the comments and let everybody know. But for now, I do not know why it's doing that. It seems like it can look up that when you look up through an IP address, but the other way, it just can't. So by name to an IP address, it's not doing that. It may be a limitation that has been put by Microsoft Azure to make sure that the DNS resolution does not happen between two cloud services, across cloud services for a very good reason, but I'm just not aware of why it is. But otherwise, just for your exam purposes and knowing it, you just have to remember when they are not part of the same cloud service, they will not be able to resolve each other by name. So what I'm going to do is now set up this environment here where these two virtual machines will be part of the same cloud service. I'm going to go ahead and delete all the uh, stuff that we just created. So let's get out of this RDP session because we will be creating new ones. I'm going to pause mostly through this creation here just to save some time. But basically what I do is I go and delete uh, everything that is associated with this virtual machine. So by the time we come back, except the virtual network, there'll be nothing. So I go manually and delete all of this. Um, so if you are going to do that, please go ahead and do that as well. Um, and if you are running on a trial, like I mentioned, you want to save resources as much as possible. So you want to make sure that there's nothing here except the virtual network for the next demonstration, or for all the demonstrations actually. There is a script that you can run to do this. I might post that script sometime. I'm still fixing and tweaking a couple of things on that script. What it will do is after every time we do one of these demonstrations, you can run that script and it will clear everything for you and bring it on a clean slate as if it's a new subscription. Obviously, do not run that in your production because it will most likely delete everything in your production as well. But then I'm expecting that when you are doing these demonstrations, you are doing this on a trial account or a personal account, which is not on your production. So I'll be right back after all this is cleaned up. Okay, so I have mostly deleted everything except the virtual network that we had here. So the scenario that we're going to follow is this one right now. So I'm going to create a cloud service with CRanger Cloud as the name. This is going to be a little different from what we did in previously, where we would create a virtual machine and we would automatically allow it to create a cloud service while it was creating the virtual machine. But since we are going to have both virtual machines in a single cloud service, I'm going to create the cloud service first. So if you go to the cloud service here, create a cloud service. I'm going to create one, and if I can remember the name, CRanger Cloud. CRanger Cloud. Okay, it's publicly available. And we know that a cloud service always has to be associated with your location or a region. So I'm going to just do this one. Create cloud service. See that it doesn't take too long to create, but then it might take up to a couple of minutes sometimes. Okay, so a cloud service has been created. Let's go to virtual machine, create a virtual machine. I said that I was going to do this a lot in the back end, but I thought that I'll show you what happens when a cloud service has already been created. So CRanger VM 100, we know the name. I'm going to just pick up this size. As you can see, this is what we have always done, that we used to have a create a cloud service and we used to have the same name or whatever, and we used to have the cloud service created while the virtual machine is being created. But now that a virtual machine, a cloud service has already been created, we can do a drop down and we can do the CRanger cloud service here. As you can see, it went and blocked the cloud service DNS name because it already had a DNS name when we created. This is the interesting thing though. If you recall, the CRanger cloud service was tied to East US2, or it was associated with East US2 region. So what this does is it says that, hey, if this VM is going to be created and you're going to put it in the in my cloud service, I'm not going to let you pick any other regions because you will have to be in the same region where I am. So this VM going into this CRanger cloud will have to only be in East US2 and it cannot be in any other regions. So the cloud service and the VM, they need to be on the same regions. However, it doesn't matter for us. We are going to just put this as virtual network. So RangerNet is our virtual network. So we'll put it in this VNet. Click next and next. And since they're going to be part of the same cloud, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for this virtual machine to be created before I go and create the other virtual machine. I'm not going to let them both run at the same time because I've noticed sometimes sharing the cloud service, there might be some conflicts. So I'll pause this and I'll come back again and I'll create the other virtual machine and I'll come back. And it's going to be a similar thing that we're going to create CRanger VM200 and we're going to make sure from the drop down that it goes to the same cloud service. So I'll be right back. Okay, as you can see here that I'm creating the CRanger VM200 now. Putting in all the information. The virtual machine name is CRanger VM200. Let's click on next. And what we can see here is that it's trying to create a new cloud service. Obviously, we want to put it back into CRanger's cloud. I don't want to put it back. I just want to put it in CRanger cloud. So what we are doing is right now having two virtual machines. This one is already in CRanger cloud. I'm putting this one in CRanger cloud right now. So it's in CRanger net. Okay. And everything else is going to be the default. And we will be back once I have RDP'd into both this virtual machines, just like the previous one. Okay, so both virtual machines have been created, and let's go ahead and connect an RDP into these two virtual machines. Okay, I have RDP to both servers, and just like the last time, we have to make sure that we disable firewall on these both servers as well, so we can let that ping or the ICMP traffic come through for our purposes. So let me go ahead and do that on both the servers real quick. Okay, now that the firewalls are turned off on both servers, I will go to CRanger VM1. Let's fire up the PowerShell. Just like the previous one, let's look at the host name, CRanger VM100, and the IP address is 192.168.1.4, and this one is 192.168.1.5, and the host name of this one is CRanger VM200. Okay, so we are expecting this time. This is the scenario, once again, these two virtual machines in one cloud service. So let's go ahead and ping 192.168.1.5, which is the IP address of CRanger VM200. And the difference is this time we are on CRanger VM100, but we are going to go ping CRanger VM200. And since they're on the same cloud service, they'll work out. Yep, as expected, they're working out. So what we have established from this demonstration is that as long as you are on the same cloud service, you can ping by host name, and the Azure built-in DNS will support that. And if you are running across two separate cloud services, you'll need your own DNS server for the host name resolution. Okay, I think this brings us to the end of our session, the part 3. As usual, the training site URL is at www.cloudranger.net/Azure training. We are on YouTube at Cloud Ranger Network and Twitter at Cloud Ranger blog and Google Plus, as well as email. You can email me for anything you want or to know regarding Microsoft Azure at sean@cloudranger.net. Feel free to leave comments on the videos and like the videos. Recently, I have received a bunch of emails in my email account here, sean@cloudranger.net, and I have replied to those emails. But I just wish some of them were technical questions, and I just wish that those questions were actually there on YouTube comments, so I could have replied to those comments on the YouTube channel or on my blog, and there will be others who would be beneficial. So while I appreciate the emails, if you can leave comments on the YouTube videos where you ask the questions, that would be beneficial for everybody. And do like the videos on YouTube. This definitely helps as an encouragement to keep doing this for you. So I'd like to thank you for viewing, and I'll be seeing you in the next sessions. We do have another few parts that are there for the Azure Virtual Networks where we'll be talking about VPN and all sort of things like those. So thank you.